So, thank you. So just to give a bit of a background about where these diaries have come from, Common Press is a publisher of short fiction. We specialise in short fiction. We do a lot of work in translation, and we have a series. One of our many series is a Reading the City series. And in 2013 and 14, we did a book of Gaza, one of many books of the city that we do, an anthology of writing from Gaza. And we brought the editor of that book, Atef Abu Saif, who I'd known since 2009, to the UK to do a tour of that book. And immediately after he returned, the onslaught, the 51-day onslaught of 2014, the summer of 2014, began. And I was in contact with him and the other writers that I've been working with so closely, just to check in with them, see if they're alive and how they were. And they started sending me back little snippets about how they survive a war, and how you adapt to a war, how you survive a bombing. Simple things like sleeping in the middle of the flat so that the glass from the windows wouldn't, from the compression explosions wouldn't cut you or injure you. Simple things, simple practices that they'd learned through so many wars, so many onslaughts. And these little snippets of life grew, and I shared them on my social media, on my Facebook, and eventually Atef began writing a daily diary of the war in English, which we were able to get into various newspapers around the world, like New York Times and Guardian, places like that. And that grew into a full collection, a full diary of the war, all 51 days of the war, which was a book called The Drone Eats With Me, which was published in 2015. And when the current genocide started in October 7th, Atef's life has changed a lot since then. He'd left Gaza, moved to Ramallah, became a government minister. All kinds of strange things had happened to him since then. But he had just happened to be visiting Gaza for work with his son when it all started. And we found ourselves in this very, very strange Groundhog Day kind of deja vu moment where once again, every day he was writing these diaries and sending them to me. He was sending them to me as voice notes and WhatsApps, whereas previously he'd sent them to me as emails. The technology had changed, the situation hadn't. And in between the 9 years between the 2014 war and the current genocide, a lot had happened in my life, linking me to Gaza, like personally through family, and yeah, so I found myself visiting. My wife's from Gaza. Found myself visiting Gaza in 2022, and spending a lot of time, a whole month, just visiting writers, going to literary events and art events, and it was astonishing. I was taken to 2 or 3 events a day. I'd never been to seen so much kind of literary activity in any city. I thought Manchester was an exciting city for art, cultural production. Gaza is incredible, and there's all these different schools and groups and unions and parallel activities. And whilst I was there, I met Nahil Mohana, who's read by Maxine, who kind of works outside of those. Some of those schools, and I also met a young graduate, Sondos Sabra, who helped me interpreted for me for a couple of meetings just voluntarily, and was just brilliant. And I stayed in touch with them. And when the war started, I was in touch with them, obviously, along with countless other friends and family and writers. And as Nahil says in her diaries, she was surrounded for like a month, effectively, with no communication. We didn't know if she was alive or dead. And there was a rumour that went round that she was dead. And I had spoken to her many times. And in the 7th of December, a friend of ours, Rifat Al-Arer, was killed, and I just assumed the worst from what had happened to her as well. So that's sort of where the diaries come from, just to give you a little bit of context. Just to introduce tonight's guest, Basma, we're very lucky, very fortunate, very privileged to have tonight's full guest. Basma Ghalayini is Comma's Arabic editor, and she's a translator and interpreter. She was born in Gaza, lived there till she was 27, and she's the editor of Palestine Plus 100, which is an anthology of science fiction from Palestine. Naomi Wimborne-Idrissi is the founding member and media officer of Jewish Voice for Labour, former vice chair of Chingford and Wood Green Labour Party. She's a life member of the National Union of Journalists and International Solidarity Officer for South Kent Division of the National Education Union. Naomi was elected as a member of the Labour Party's NEC National Executive Committee in the summer of 2022 and was then expelled, one of many, many Jewish victims of the current leadership's purge of the left. She has been a leading campaigner against the weaponization of accusations of anti-Semitism against supporters of Palestine. I think she deserves an applause. A special applause. Hind Shoufani, who's one of the performers tonight, is a BAFTA award-winning Palestinian-American filmmaker, writer, poet. She grew up all over the Arab world and now calls Brooklyn home. She's a New York University filmmaking MFA, a Fulbright scholarship awardee, and recipient of an international writing program residency at the University of Iowa. She has many, many strings to her bow. She was, amongst many that I don't have time for now, she was the co-writer of the Oscar-nominated and BAFTA-winning short film The Present, which if you haven't seen already, go and see it. It's on Netflix, and she has curated and hosted poetry and spoken word communal events for over 15 years. Please put your hands together for Hind. And Omar Robert Hamilton is an award-winning filmmaker and writer. He's the author of The City Always Wins, which was inspired by the revolution, the Egyptian revolution of 2011 and the so-called Arab Spring, which won the Society of Authors Betty Trask Award. He's also, critically for tonight's conversation, he's also the co-founder of PALFest, the Palestine Festival of Literature, which does incredible work taking writers from the UK and around the world to Palestine and vice versa. So, round of applause for Omar. So, my first question is for Basma. Basma, you've talked about the fact that you've obviously been involved in this show, which is now shown. This is the third sort of instalment of the show. You've talked about your involvement in it being really about testimony, paying testimony more than creating a piece of art. And I wanted to give you a moment to pay testimony and to talk about for a moment, if you'll bear with me. To talk about a little bit of what has happened to your family. I should also say, before Basma answers my question, I should also say that some of the footage that you saw of archival material, photo albums and photos were taken from Basma's mum's house, which was her mum's house was bombed, her grandparents' house was bombed, her father's house and clinic was bombed. They're all destroyed, and they were salvaged by your brother, who was in Gaza at the time. So these are literally the kind of things that Atef was carrying in his bag, in his diary. So yeah, do you want to talk to us a little bit about what happened on December 18th?
Yeah, thank you. With regards to my relationship with the arts, I mean, just working through comma. When I came to Manchester in 2009, I was absolutely gobsmacked by how little talk there was or representation in artwork about Palestine, still till today, and it shocked me, absolutely shocked me. It made me angry, and this genocide has just highlighted that. I mean, with this event, for an example, it took the Barbican 10 months to put on an event to do with Palestine, 10 months. So that is, just to be fair about that, that's why I've become a bit pessimistic, and I feel the art world has failed Palestine in that sense. So just to get that out of the way. what happened on the 19th of December, just I grew up in Gaza. I have friends there. I went to university there. I was married, divorced there, everything. And then I came to the UK. And when the genocide started, I got in touch with all my friends. I was checking up on them. And one of the friends I got in touch with, Saida, we used to be best friends at school. And then she became very religious and we kind of diverged. But we still got in touch every once in a while. She'd have a baby, I'd congratulate her, that kind of thing. Comma had a Christmas party in December. I very reluctantly agreed to go. We had new employees and I wanted to kind of be with them and just for team morale. So I was getting ready. The timeline is just very vague, but I was getting ready and I look at my phone and there were maybe five Facebook Messenger calls from Saida, this friend of mine. And I didn't look much into it because we'd spoken a couple of days before, and I just didn't think much into it. And me and my mum was staying with me at the time, and we were watching the news or we were on Facebook, and then we hear about this Annan family house made of 5 stories that's been surrounded by tanks, and people were shot. They went up. The Israelis went up floor by floor by floor, shooting everybody. Well, not shooting everybody. Sorry, they evacuated everyone up until the top floor from all the floors. And we were reading about this on Facebook, and I thought, hang on, Saida's just called me. Well, I just saw missed calls from her. I was getting ready. I was trying to get myself ready to go, and I think that she'd called in the morning, actually, and this is now the afternoon or early evening, and I called her back, and she didn't answer, but we texted, and she told me that what happened was the IDF, the Israeli Defense Army, had surrounded their building with tanks. This is a 5-story building, extended families in Gaza, they live, and they had broken down the first floor, and they kept pushing people up to the top floor. And throughout doing this, they were also shooting. So the people on the top floor, Saida lives on the 5th floor, and they could hear the shooting. They could hear the people kind of gathering, the screaming and the shouting. They gathered them all at the top floor and put the women in one room and the men in another room. They shot all the men, and they then gave orders to the artillery who were surrounding the tanks. The tanks were surrounding to shoot at the rooms that had the women and the children in them. And so they did, and Saida was in this room. Now, the point that Saida called me, the reason she'd called me is because they were stuck in this room, surrounded by bleeding people, dead and everything. And they were trying to get the ambulance in. And she called me, amongst 2 or other 3 people she knew who lived abroad, to see if I can appeal to the Red Cross to do something to just take the injured. And she called, and I didn't answer because I was busy getting ready for this party or whatever. And it was too late at that point. I mean, those who bled to death, and then the ambulances eventually came in. They came in, I want to say the next day. I can't remember the details, but it was too late. It was way too late. And I froze in my chair. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't change. My mum, thankfully my mum was with me, but that is just an example of how desperate she was, and just that's what happened on the 19th of December. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about?
Yeah. I have 3 aunts who live in. A lot of people left Gaza City to the south, but some stayed. And I have 3 elderly aunts who stayed because they just didn't want to leave. And I mean, nobody wants to leave. Nobody wants to leave. But they're elderly. They just thought, you know what, we're just going to stay. This is what's going to happen. They agreed with a few of other neighbors to just all stay together. So again, there was ongoing siege of that area, that house. It was three aunts of mine, Maysoon, Rufaida, Abu Haisa, Musaika, Arwa, sorry. Maysoon, Rufaida, and Arwa. And that's my mum, just corrected me. Thanks. And so what happened is we lost touch with them. Now we've obviously everybody has WhatsApp groups. We've got a huge WhatsApp group, and everyone's saying, anyone heard from them? Anyone heard? Nothing. The next thing I know, again, I was out and about doing something. I get a text message from one of my cousins. He, it's on the group that they found them and they were dead, burnt to death. And then I text my cousin privately and I say, what happened? He said, I mean, if you can take it, can you take it? I say, yeah, it sends me pictures. And what happened was the IDF came early in the morning to their house, and one of them opened the door, they shot her. This is, the reason we know this is, you'll soon find out. One of them opened the door, they shot her dead, shot the other one, and then shot the third one in the arm, and left her. She was on a Zimmer. And the reason we know that this happened before the three of them were found burnt to death is because the third one had sent a voice note to my cousin, who I was in touch with, and he forwarded me the voice note saying, I'm here, they're both dead, I don't know what to do, I don't know why they spared me, they must have thought, oh look, she's pathetic, she's on a Zimmer, we're not going to do anything there. And this was the last voice note he sent her, she sent him. This would have been around 10 a.m. They removed the siege later in the afternoon, and the whole house was burnt. All of them were burnt. And what happened was they sent in a missile after killing the two and sparing the third. They sent in a missile which obliterated the whole house, including the third. And so that's what happened.
Thank you, Basma. There's about 3 other stories like that we don't have time for, but just as terrible. I'm going to ask Naomi. Naomi, you've been a kind of a lone voice, or one of very few lone voices on the political left and within the Labour Party, fighting against this anti-Semitism slur and the weaponisation of the anti-Semitism slur to kind of shut down pro-Palestinian points of view. And but you've been a fairly lone, fairly rare exception to what we have, which is a political establishment in which there is absolutely no difference between the two major parties, whether it was our general election in July this year or whether it's the US election in November. There is absolutely no difference. You can't get a cigarette paper between the two positions when it comes to Israel of the two major parties, to the point where there is literally no point in voting, a meaningful point in voting, because they're exactly the same. Their only difference is stylistic, is presentational, etc., etc. And it's an impossible question, Naomi, so forgive me, but how have we got into this state?
Well, Ra, I think it is an impossible question. Before I start launching into some sort of an answer, I must say that Basra's story is, we are speechless. I mean, I'm sure everybody in this room, after 11 months of this, has no more words. But what we've seen tonight is an expression of Palestinian humanity, and it's that humanity that the Israeli state and its supporters is trying to erase. And that's why events like this are so incredibly important and why we mustn't allow those voices to be suppressed. I was originally going to talk about the election in the UK and how that came to be the way it was and so on. But I think I'm going to leap forward, to be honest, Ra, because let's just quickly look at the Labour Party, because what has been happening in the Labour Party has now translated itself to wider society in a very dangerous and alarming way. Jewish Voice for Labour, the group I'm in, that is my friend Diana over there, another Jewish activist, was founded in 2017 because anti-Semitism allegations were being used to try and discredit Jeremy Corbyn and the left. I mean, the establishment had thrown everything at Jeremy from the moment that he was elected to the leadership in 2015. I won't go into the details, but there were many other allegations before they found this anti-Semitism smear which stuck. And with the support of the Zionist establishment, the leading Jewish organizations, which tragically have hit their colours to the Israeli mast for many years now and continue to support it, even with the most right-wing government ever and with the genocide going on. That combination of the media establishment, the political establishment, the military establishment, and the Zionist forces was the downfall of Jeremy, and we tried to support him. People in the Labour Party did not know what hit them. Those of us who've been working for Palestine for many years and for the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign since it was begun in 2004 with the call by the Palestinian academic and cultural boycott of Israel, PACB, since 2004. We know that you're going to get accused of being anti-Semitic. It's an Israeli strategy. They call it delegitimizing the delegitimizers. We're trying to undermine and delegitimize the Israeli state, the Jewish state, as they like to keep reminding us. Their job is to delegitimize us, which they do by accusing us of being motivated by hatred of Jews. So Jews like myself and Diana, and there's probably some others in the hall. Yes, I know there's at least one other. Yeah, she's waving at me. We are the wrong kind of Jew, not proper Jews, self-hating Jews, and even capos, which is a reference to Jewish inmates of the concentration camps who did the Nazis' dirty work for them. They don't like us very much, and that's why I was initially suspended and then expelled. And I would have told you more, but we really don't have time. The irony of what has happened in the Labour Party, one of many ironies, is that if you're Jewish and a member of the Labour Party, you're roughly 6 times more likely to be investigated on some sort of charge related to anti-Semitism than if you're a non-Jewish, ordinary rank-and-file Labour Party member. If you're a member of JVL, I've got to refer to the figures here because it's so ridiculous. If you're a member of Jewish Voice for Labour, you're 38 times more likely to be investigated, and some of us have been investigated several times, like Diana here. And if you're an executive committee member of JVL, you are 248 times more likely to be investigated. 11 of the 12 of us have been, and half of us have been expelled. So there you go. So if you want to tackle anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, the best way to do it is to expel elderly Jewish people. I mean, you couldn't make it up. But the serious thing about it, though, of course, is that in wider society, the conflation of Zionism with being Jewish is so total that it's very difficult to break through, and this is why we have this mad idea that people going out on the marches to oppose the genocide are motivated by hatred of Jews. And anti-Semitism is rising because if you keep seeing Jews popping up and saying genocide is fine, some people are going to develop a certain hostility. I know Ra's going to try and move me on, so I think we need to address the question of how we respond to this, because you can despair. I mean, I'm sure we will have moments of despair watching what's going on. And there is a tool in our hands, and it's called the cultural boycott. I've already referred to PACB. It's a Palestinian-led call. It's inspired by the South African boycott campaign, which eventually helped to dismantle the apartheid regime in South Africa. I've got a booklet here. It's old, this booklet. Produced in 2013, but for those of you people are worried about the idea of boycott. The Zionists will say, haha, you're doing what the Nazis did to the Jews, boycotting Jewish businesses. It's much more subtle than that, and it can be very effective. We have to fight back because the Zionist forces are trying very hard to boycott anything to do with Palestine. You may not know this, but the UK Lawyers for Israel, a particularly noxious organisation, tried to bully the Barbican in cancelling this event tonight Thank you, Barbican, for sticking out and making sure that that didn't happen. And so, I mean, there's lots more we can talk about. Maybe there will be some time for questions, and we can go into a bit more detail. But come and get the booklet. You can have it for free if you want to give a donation to Artists for Palestine UK, who produced it. That would be nice.
Thank you, Naomi. Omar, I wanted to ask you a sort of a similar question, really. As everybody's been saying, there has been a complete silence in the cultural industries, in the arts world. My auntie tried to take her grandchildren, 2 grandchildren, to a pantomime in Manchester at the Palace Theatre in Manchester, wearing a tiny little Palestinian pin, and was told to take it off. She couldn't come in the building if she was wearing it. And she was given a token, like a cloakroom token, and was told it was going to be put in a safe and she can get it on the way out. That's what the arts community has done. That is not an exaggeration. We've had cancellations of pro-Palestinian artists. We've had cancellations of Palestinian artists. We've had generally a kind of complete silence. The art world has chosen to suddenly live in some parallel universe where this isn't going on. PalFest has been a rare exception to that. So thank you, Omar, for that. My question to you is, how did the arts world become get to be so neutered by the Zionists? How are the Zionists so effectively kind of scared? How have they scared the art world so thoroughly?
That's a big question. Okay. Test. Hi. I think often when this question gets asked, people refer back to Ukraine, right? And they're like, look at what happened with Ukraine, and why isn't the arts world doing the same? And that there was this moment where, it's just been constantly referenced over the last year that there was this benchmark where 2 years ago, 3 years ago, everybody had Ukrainian flags, every arts organization was taking positions, Russians were being boycotted, the government launched a sort of, sanctions and boycotts against Russian oligarchs and so on. And I think it's useful for us to think about it not in terms of like, this is an example that is being failed to be matched again, but actually Ukraine is the state's war, right? Ukraine is a war that the state is involved in. It's arming one side of it. It's assisting them with intelligence. It's assisting them in the international arena. It's assisting them in the economic arena. And so in the case of Palestine, Israel is the state's war. Israel is the side, the entity that it is arming, that it is helping with reconnaissance and logistics and intelligence, with international cover, with legal cover. So I think when we think about the arts landscape or the cultural landscape in this country, we should think about the fact that we are not inundated with Israeli flags is a victory. That it's not I stand with Israel, because that's the position that they would have, right? That's the position that the state and all the state's apparatus and the establishment would have being enacted. And so every space that we have, every thing that we've held back, I think should be considered a victory. And there's still a long way to go, but considering then what a conservative country this is and the power of the establishment, and I think in particular the moment that we're still living in now in the kind of post-Corbyn, the way that the accusation of anti-Semitism was so effectively weaponized to destroy the prospect of socialism in this country, and has then had this ongoing silencing effect for the last 5 years. The challenges are significant, and the arts institutions in the country generally are part of an establishment system that they're looking to sort of keep propped up, whether consciously or not, but they're mostly not radical spaces looking to overturn the context in which they're operating. And so given all that, I do think that we have a lot to be, not pleased with, but I think there is a strength on the Palestine movement side, and I think there's a strength on the side of the people that see and understand what's going on for what it is and are committed to justice for Palestine. And, we're seeing it in the marches, which, I'm very proud that London has been, the city that has led the way in the whole world consistently, you know, and that's a lot down to like decades of work by PSC that has built an infrastructure that has allowed this to happen. So yeah, in terms of specifically how the Zionists sort of maintain the sort of the level that they have, I don't know. I would say also, in my work, you know, we work a lot with a lot of different cultural institutions and organizations and artists and writers I'm in touch with all the time. And I would say that the structure that I'm seeing again and again and again is that in almost every institution, the workers and the talent and the artists are with Palestine, and the administration and the funders are not. And so there is a kind of thin veneer that is basically holding back the change, right? And the masses and the people and the talent and the actual will of the culture and the people. And that's cracking, right? And that cracking it's visible. Like, I mean, we can all feel that we are not far away from a total delegitimization of Israel across the entire world. Like, it doesn't feel far away, right? And it feels to me like it's being held back by a really very narrow band of elite power that is, you know, very much aligned with the forces that dominate the political parties, and that, yeah, I'm kind of going to loop now.
Well, it's very, very hopeful. Thank you. Thank you, Omar. My question for Hind is more of a kind of an individual question, just about you as an artist, and something which we all feel coming to an event like this, or just looking at the news. We all feel just utterly helpless and impotent and unable to do anything. And I just wondered, I wanted to ask you, you made this film, The Present, which was very, very successful at conveying ordinary life for Palestinians in the West Bank. How do you respond to something like this, which even by Palestinian standards is extraordinary? This is like, it's genocidal, it's apocalyptic. There isn't really a word that covers it. How do you respond as an artist at all? How do you drag yourself off the floor and do anything about this?
I guess I woke up on January 2nd and was like, I need a therapist for the first time in like 45 years. And I've lived in Beirut for most of my life, lost both my parents in tragic circumstances, and didn't think I needed help. And then this year I clearly did. So it's been rough on all of us. Thank you to those who have tears in their faces in the audience. It was really good to see you and feel your presence. So thanks for that. I don't know how artists are doing it. I think it's separate for each person. I think some people are galvanized like never before, and they're on fire, and they're finding stories to tell, and they're finding music to make, and they're finding collaborators around the world, because there's no doubt that the Palestinians are loved globally between people far more than Zionists are. You can see it from their rallies, you can see it from their... And I think that's part of their viciousness, is this total feeling of being, like, after 70-something years of their Zionist state, clearly like 60, 70% of them are genocidal. And when the world is not reacting well to this, even in late-stage capitalism, even in climate change, even in all the collapses we're seeing revolutions around so many countries, so many places are having their own uprisings, whether it's students in Africa, whether it's Bangladesh. So we're part of a global movement, I think, the Palestinians, and in a way, I think we're possibly leading some form of reckoning that people are having, that, like, we cannot continue to plunder the earth this way, and we cannot continue to be friggin' racists, to be polite. And I think once the generation of racists who have been in power for a long time disappear, as people die and age, the younger people who are less racist may have a better world. Sometimes I wish I had a daughter who could pick up the mantle, but sometimes I think my poems and films can be children in their own way. I personally don't know how I've dealt with this. A lot of staring into space and crying and talking to people and allowing ourselves grace to not be as productive. There's various ways to think about this. Not forcing yourself to be productive in the middle of a genocide, because you know what? You're not a producing machine. You are not your work. I have to always remember that I am not a film and I am not my writing. I'm a human being and a daughter, and I have to take care of some of that stuff and not always feel compelled to do a ton of work. Sometimes that stuff is performative, and actually we've become very intelligent at figuring out who's performative and who's grifting from the Palestinian cause and who's genuinely an ally. I think the Jewish people are going to save us, actually. It's on them to really, in the world at large, yes, thank you. It's on them. They have more power than most Palestinians. I personally struggle with a lot of shame and guilt because I'm comfortable in Brooklyn. My friends are wonderful. There's no Zionists bothering me in Brooklyn. Everybody around me is progressive. I belong in these wonderful communal spaces. I know it's a there's a lot of Israelis and Jews around Brooklyn, and it can be more difficult, but in my world, it has been nothing but love and seeing posters everywhere and stickers in the subway and people just constantly coming to us and supporting. I've written about 30,000 words, maybe 35,000 words since the genocide started. Most of it is probably just hysterical gibberish, but maybe one day it'll be published. I'm reading a lot and performing a lot. And I'm wondering when I can go back to Palestine to make a film, to continue my film on Christians of Galilee, because I began a film in Galilee years ago, and I feel like I can't complete it now without what's happening, because the existential threat that affected Arabs inside Israel, Palestinians inside Israel, has gotten so much worse. They were sort of somewhat safe 5 years ago when I began filming. Now they're discombobulated, fragmented, censored, silenced, terrified. Haven't seen my family in a few years. So that's part of my mission this year, is to find a way to go. The airport, there's fires everywhere. The rockets are landing very near our village. So these are complicated things to navigate. Smoking a bit of weed in Brooklyn, trying to get as many hugs as I can. Dealing with a lot of shame and guilt because I've always wanted to, I wish I was a doctor, I wish I was a human rights lawyer. Tell your kids we need more Palestinian or allies human rights lawyers. That's where we're lacking. There's enough singers and writers, and we need human rights lawyers who can bail the kids out of university, like bail the kids out of jail. I've always wanted, I wish I was not a coward. I wish I was on the Egyptian border like some of my friends are. I'm a person of language and of image. And I think people who are trained in what they love to do and what they're probably reasonably good at, they should do it. And I have to remind myself constantly that when I was a child in Palestine, in the camps, that the music of Marsa al-Khalifi, the music of many, 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 many people, the poetry of many people, really radically changed my life growing up in Damascus, Beirut, and Amman. Therefore, when I go and read sometimes and I find people coming to me after the event and hugging and crying and wanting to be on Instagram and wanting to show me things, that yes, it's not frou-frou, it's not frivolous, it's not silly, it's not unnecessary. Sometimes I think, what's one more Palestinian book? My God, Twitter is thousands of books come out a day. And then I see like list of top Palestinian books and it's like 15 of them or 30 of them. Or let's say 50 maximum. We could use more Palestinian art. I have to keep reminding myself that I am oversaturated with the Nakba because I grew up in Beirut and Damascus where the Nakba is discussed every day on every possible channel. It took me a long time because I'm a dumb artist sometimes and a bit naive, but I didn't realize that nobody in the US really was allowed to talk about the Nakba in '48, was even allowed to discuss it. It's shocking to me. So now I'm in the belly of the beast inside New York, and the work is there, I think, somehow. And I really don't know. I mean, I'm politically so, and I'll end on this, I'm having such a difficult time marrying the despair of the worst thing I've ever seen, and the worst thing, I can't even fathom what's happening to people and the violence inflicted. I can't process it. At the same time, there's a global intifada in our name. It is astounding that people in Japan are doing this. People everywhere are doing this, and they haven't stopped, thankfully. But I also feel like we've been telling you guys for 76 bloody years, and it took a genocide for people to notice. And until the the government of the US is forced to change its genocidal track, whether it's Kamala or the idiot Trump. We are stuck with Israel until the US turns the tap off. And I think, having loved the UK for so long, and I have so many people I love in the UK, and so many activists I know, I think it's horrifically sad the UK has joined the US the past few decades. This country would have done very differently had the US not been such an ally and maybe an example. Even down to the food, you know? Anyway, thank you all for being here. I don't know if I answered the question. It's a rough time. I'm functioning at 60% capacity most of the time.
Shukran, ya Hind. I hope to have time to have questions from the audience, but I'm afraid we've overrun. So there is time to carry on talking to all of us or any of us in the foyer. The Atef's diary is on sale. All the money from those sales goes to charity, and all the money from tonight has gone to the 3 writers stuck. It will go to the 3 writers stuck in Gaza. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody involved. Thank you.